Welcome back, everybody. I'm Travis with Linux Academy. In this lesson, we're going to start working with the entry point instruction. First off, your container will run as an executable. The second is that, for the most part, your entry point is going to be concrete. It's not exactly immutable. You can append things to the end of it, but unless you are specifically using the entry point flag, when you append your Docker container run with a command, it's going to get appended to the end of the entry point. And we'll cover more of this later on in the video. But for now, we're just going to go and create a new version of the weather app. But this time, rather than using the CMD instruction, we'll use an entry point. Start by going over to Docker Images, create a new directory called Entrypoint, and then navigate into it. Create a new Docker file, and then add the following instructions. And as always, you can find the contents of this Docker file in the description of the video. We've been working with the weather app for several lessons now, so this Docker file should not be that foreign to you. The only thing that we've really changed here is that we removed the CMD instruction and replaced it with the entry point. It's still doing the exact same thing. We're going to be executing /bin dub. So let's go and build this image. Now for this to work right, I have to go and clone the weather app source code, because if I don't, the build will fail. Now I can go and execute docker image build. We're going to call the image Linux Academy /weather app, and we're going to be tagging it as v4. Now we're going to go and create a container using the image. I'm not too concerned about the port mapping. What we're going to do is inspect the container once it's running. Now I'm going to go and inspect weather app 4 and grep for CMD, and it's set to null. Typically, when you have a container that is using a command, it would show up. For example, I have the weather app non-root container still running, and this container does have a command. So we're executing bin sh -c and then /bin dub. This time I'm going to go and do an inspect on weather app 4 without grepping for CMD. And if you scroll all the way to the top, we have our path, which is bin sh, and then we have our args. So this is coming in with -c and then the entry point. Now let's go and spin up a new container, but this time we're going to go and append a command at the end. So I'm just going to go and tack on echo hello world. Actually, I do need to remove the exclamation point because it will cause an error. And now when we go inspect weather app 5, we're going to notice some differences here. The first is that we have the command coming in. So we have echo and hello world. And if we scroll all the way up to our args, you can see that we have -c and then bin dub. And now the echo hello world is being appended to it. What this allows us to do is add additional flags to an entry point if they have any. The next example we're going to be working with is Prometheus, which has some additional flags we can use. So let's go and take a look at that. So we're going to start off by looking at the Prometheus Docker file. As you can see, we have the entry point. It's going to be bin Prometheus. And then we have commands that are just going to be appended to the end of our entry point. This includes things like the configuration file, how Prometheus will go and store data, and then just some web console settings. So this is a really good example of how we can use the entry point instruction alongside the CMD instruction. We're going to start off by creating a couple of volumes. We're going to create the Prometheus volume, which is going to be mounted into etc Prometheus. Next is the Prometheus data volume. This is where the data for Prometheus will be stored. For everything to work right, we're going to have to go and change the owner to fs nobody on both of the volumes. If we don't, Prometheus will fail to start. This is because it doesn't have permissions to the directory. Now we're ready to go and create the Prometheus container. So here are my volumes right here. The first one, Prometheus, is being mapped into etc Prometheus. Prometheus data is going to be mapped into Prometheus/data. Now, because we're overriding the default commands, we need to make sure that config file is being set to etc Prometheus prometheus.yaml. And by default, the storage directory is Prometheus, but we're changing it to Prometheus data. So we need to make sure that we specify storage, tsdb, path. Execute a docker container ls. We want to make sure that our container is running, and it is here. And it's right here, so that's good. Now we can go and inspect the Prometheus container. The first thing we'll do is we'll look at the commands, and you can see both of them are being passed in. Scrolling all the way up to the beginning, you can see that we have our path, which is bin Prometheus, and that the arguments that are being supplied are the ones that we passed in. To quickly recap, When we use an entry point, it is making our container an executable. Entry points are somewhat concrete. When we go and create a container and pass a command, that entry point does not get overwritten. Rather, the command gets appended to the end of the entry point. And if we want to overwrite the entry point, we have to use the entry point flag. That's all I have for this lesson. Go ahead and mark it complete.